Welcome to the Compliance 911 Show, a no-nonsense podcast discussing hot topics for today's busy compliance professional. It's everything you wanted to know about regulatory compliance, but we're afraid to ask. And now, here are your hosts, Dean Stockford of M&M Consulting and Len Suzio of GeoDataVision.
Good morning, Dean. At the recent M&M Compliance School, we spoke at length about many hot regulatory areas such as fair lending, CRA, climate risk, UDAAP, representments, etc. What valuable topic are you bringing to the table today, Dean?
Len, it's a pleasure to see you again, and thank you for presenting at our compliance school. In fact, let me take just a minute to talk about that. Last week was, or I should say 2 weeks ago, I guess all the weeks seem to blend together, but a couple of weeks ago, M&M Consulting held its 13th annual regulatory compliance school. And over the 3.5 days, we had over 160 participants with a myriad of topics that are important to compliance professionals. Our annual compliance school has turned out to be one of the largest regulatory schools in all of New England. In fact, we're arguably one of the only regulatory compliance schools in the country besides those presented by the big associations such as the ABA, the ICBA, the CBA, the NCUA, etc. So it was very exciting. It's a fully accredited school through ABA accreditation. And we draw compliance professionals from various agencies in different financial sectors. We've had participants in the past from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the FDIC, the OCC, most recently the U.S. Attorney's Office, and also a former law enforcement and cybersecurity professional, different local associations, as well as firms such as yourself, such as GeoDataVision, that help us give our audience a very unique perspective on regulatory compliance. And as I indicated, it's fully accredited. This year, we also did something which is slightly unique, and we had our first ever roundtable discussion on the final day. And we were blessed to have Dr. Ken Thomas, a Penn Wharton graduate, as well as a professor. Not to mention, as you know, he wrote the book on CRA. The only thing I can say is the school was very successful. I encourage the audience to visit our website often so that they can take advantage of the various training offers that we do have in addition to the school. And we met last week actually to kick off the planning process for 2023. And we kicked the tires around a little bit, Len, and of course, I know that that you're going to be part of that school and whatever other training offerings we have. But you and I have collaborated on many different things, and we've talked about perhaps putting together some more in the weed type CRA plug and play guidance as well. So there's a lot coming at us, and I just encourage people to not only visit your website at geodatavision.com, but also the M&M website, as well as our Compliance 911 Show website. Use those as a source of information because we're trying to get it all out there for everybody to take advantage of. And, it's our pleasure. I'm sure, I know you probably echo the same thing. It's our pleasure to be able to provide these impactful events, conferences, schools to clients all over the place. So very, very appreciative of what we accomplished a couple of weeks ago. And again, I thank you, Len, from the bottom of my heart for your participation in that event.
Well, Dean, you're right to be proud of what you do with M&M and the annual compliance school. I found that even though I was a speaker there, I learned from some of the other speakers about some of the other interesting topics that they were addressing. So it was of great benefit to me, too, to learn about some of these other hot topics. And I want to encourage you to keep up the great work at M&M. This conference, this annual conference, is extremely informative and helpful. And I think anyone listening to today's podcast ought to look it up on your website and see about maybe next year's compliance school, which I know is going to have at least one nationally recognized speaker that will be new to the program.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Len. And all I can say is our alliance is strong, and we'll continue to collaborate and work together on providing the best in class solutions to people in the financial industry. So I'm very excited and look forward to next year as I sit here with nationally recognized speakers. From various agencies, so on and so forth. So very excited. So let me, without further ado, let me delve into today's topic. And I thought it was kind of important. We didn't really cover it, only some components of it at Compliance School, but it deals with compliance management systems. And when we start peeling back the onion and think about all the things we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago, excuse me, at the school, with fair lending, with CRA, with UDAAP, with representments, and obviously the thread, there is a common thread, and that common thread ties everything back to the compliance management system. So with everything discussed at the school, it's imperative that compliance professionals visit their compliance management systems to ensure it is working and includes the appropriate amount of board and management oversight, sound policies, procedures, training. And when I say training, I'm not talking about the type of generic training where you can go on and take the test 150 times if you fail it. It needs to be more job specific training. We need to challenge people. We need to ensure that they understand what it is that they're training to, and also complaint management. Never discredit that. It's very imperative that folks pay attention to all of those various pillars within the compliance management system.
Great advice, Dean. With the proposed changes just to CRA, I can see the importance of a sound CMS. Given how drastic and convoluted the proposed regulation is, if nothing changes, this will probably be the most sweeping change banks have faced with any regulation. So you picked a winning topic today.
Yeah, Len, you're spot on as always. An effective compliance management system commonly has two interdependent control components. And I think that, we want to obviously discuss those. You have board and management oversight, and then you have the compliance program itself, which again gets into sound policies and procedures. And that, don't just create a policy for the sake of creating a policy. There has to be a tone at the top and setting policy that's consistent, with the strategic planning and missions of the institution. Procedures should be separate from your policy. You don't want to commingle your procedures and policy, because then you're turning around and going to the board every time you have to get something approved. And those procedures should be step action. I know the analogy everybody uses is, you step out the door and get hit by a bus, who's going to know what to do? I hate that analogy. I like to be a little more optimistic. If you leave and go to Hawaii and never come back, then who can pick up the pieces and know what it is that they're supposed to be doing? So I think it's imperative that we create what we call step action procedures. Somebody can walk in who knows nothing, read the procedure, and understand how to comply with the requirements based on that particular written procedure. Training programs, once again, job specific. We can't have generic training programs where you just take a test at the end and say, okay, I understand what it is that I'm doing. So more job specific training. Monitoring, I mean, that hasn't gone away, folks, although we talk about auditing on a regular basis, and the regulators have somehow pushed a lot of our third party monitoring firms into more independence and in an audit process. We can't discredit monitoring. We have to make sure that we understand what monitoring controls in place. These should be risk focused and based on current events that are occurring, and we want to make sure those aren't siloed as well. And then, of course, the consumer complaint response, which is extremely important. And we've seen a significant uptick in complaints, and part of that is because of the ease of reporting from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So when the two interdependent control components are strong and well coordinated, an institution should be successful in managing its compliance responsibilities and risk. I think the real big issue we've seen with CMS, which I just mentioned, and probably more in larger institutions than some of your smaller institutions, And that is where processes become siloed relative to the compliance management program. We may disseminate amongst the various departments responsibilities, but we failed to connect the dots to the overall CMS, which is imperative. So if you do have various managers, senior managers, or individuals within those departments who have compliance monitoring responsibilities, how do we bring that back to our compliance management system overall, and then provide for appropriate controls and reporting on those various compliance areas and those components that drive our compliance management system?
Well, that seems like a no-brainer, having the various departments report through the CMS.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, sometimes I'm a little miffed as to how folks fail to connect the dots. They more or less push things off their desk and say, okay, it's your responsibility to take care of this. And while it may be true, you still have to pull that full circle back to the compliance management system. So, you'd be surprised how many institutions actually, disseminate their compliance appropriately so through the organization, but they can't connect those dots or bring it back full circle. I've always thought of it kind of like an octopus, and this may sound like very strange, but you have all these arms and tentacles, but they need to connect them to the body for everything to work right. So you can have all the tentacles and all the arms that you need and want, that are reaching out and providing certain monitoring services. But if you don't have anything to connect those or bring them back to the body, then they're essentially useless. And that's how I kind of view CMS as well.
That's a great analogy, Dean. So, Dr. Dean, do you have any recommendations for institutions regarding this issue?
Dr. Dean, I haven't heard that for a long time. People back in high school, they used to call me doctor because my first name is Dean and my middle initial is R. So they always used to call me Dr. Stock. And so kind of interesting.
DR.
Yeah, DR. So it's kind of interesting that you say that. I think they also make a DR makes a weed trimmer too. So I guess you could say I'm a weed trimmer. Who knows? But in any case, to answer your question, Len, many of the issues we've seen are the direct result of poor communication and culture. And I think that kind of, finds its way through all institutions where we have these, I'll call them temporary breakdowns in communication. And we create this culture where folks are afraid to speak up or say stuff or at least, I don't want to call it stepping on toes, but certainly they get involved in the grind. They don't want to stir the pot necessarily. So communications break down, the culture breaks down, and as a result of that, there are issues. So effective communication is the glue that binds these teams together. And team connectivity is crucial for a successful compliance management system. So I would recommend the following: remove or get rid of staff who embrace a siloed mentality. There's just no room for them. And I know we're in a very difficult staffing economy, but these folks are toxic to your success, and they cost you more in the long run. So get rid of them. Establish leadership. Tone at the top. Very important, and make sure that those leadership responsibilities are again disseminated throughout the institution. Draw a map of your compliance management system. I know you and I talk about this all the time. I'm so intrigued because you're always providing me with these visuals, and I think it's imperative that folks get that visual. So a map will help you establish that visual and how compliance could be or is disseminated within your financial institutions. It also assigns responsibility for each one of those areas so that you know which area you need to connect to the overall, or pull in, I should say, to your CMS. Communicate the institution's vision and mission. It's imperative that we do that as well. Set goals for middle management and ensure appropriate reporting on compliance and to compliance. Create cross-department meetings or working days for team members to ensure everyone understands the workflows and the why behind our mission. Once again, people have responsibilities. They're not really sure why they're doing what they're doing. They go through the motions of doing it because ultimately they say, well, I was told that I have to do that. Well, it's kind of important that we understand the why behind it, and that we have the appropriate connection of those dots to senior personnel within the compliance department. Make sure all employees from different areas know each other and communicate regularly. Just because I'm in, one person's in commercial loans and the other one's in retail, or perhaps even in deposit operations, those folks still need to communicate regularly, especially if they're part of an overall compliance management team and process. Ensure that your team members have the tools required to achieve the mission, whether it's technology or whether it's human related. We still have to have the tools required in order to do what we need to do. And then last but not least, train. Don't just train on what the regulatory topics are. Train them on the job itself and what that entails, and all the way from the tone at the top down through the various departments. If institutions follow all those basic guidelines, I can't guarantee anything, but I can certainly say that you'll strengthen your CMS and ensure compliance is not siloed within those various departments.
That's great advice, Dean, not only for financial institutions, but for any business.
Yeah, no, I thank you for that. And I agree. I think that the business principles are generally the same. But the larger we get, the more vulnerable we become as a result of communication failures. So once again, let's make sure that we communicate effectively. If there's anything that we've learned through COVID, communication is key, no matter how you accomplish it, whether it's through the phone, whether it's through virtual means, or however you accomplish it. Those touch points are important. That communication is critical, especially with everything that we've talked about over the last few weeks and all of the regulatory changes that are coming at us. So again, I hope everybody enjoyed today. This is Dean Stockford from M&M Consulting.
And this is Len Suzio of GeoDataVision saying, thank you for listening to today's podcast, and please let us know of any future topics you would like us to present.
Thanks for listening to the Compliance 911 Show. If you like the podcast, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. While you're at it, please give us a like and review to help others find the show. As always, links are in the show notes, and you can always find us online at compliance911show.com. Follow M&M Consulting and GeoDataVision on LinkedIn for all the latest news and information on compliance hot topics.